After falling to 0-2 in the Big 12 and 2-3 overall with yet another gut punch home loss, Baylor has reportedly suspended two of their starters who have only just joined the team this year through the transfer portal. What is going on?
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on the Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day. The aftermath of the Bears' 34-28 loss to BYU after they fell down 21-0 in yet another slow start. We're going to go over what is behind those slow starts, or what we theorize is behind what's behind those slow starts, as well as the big news that reportedly Baylor has suspended two starters who have only just joined the team, plus an interesting comment made by a recruit's dad and maybe a little truth serum for what Baylor fans have done to this 2025 recruiting class, or what they could be doing to this great 2025 recruiting class. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. The big news coming out of this game is from Zach Smith of the Waco Tribune-Herald, reporting that Baylor has suspended two starters, disciplinary off-the-field issues, and those would be Steve Linton and Michael Trigg. There were plenty of us in the press box on Saturday looking down and saying, there's a lot of guys we can't spot here. You know, there were some guys, in their sweats and had their jerseys on, weren't playing because of injury. Campbell Barrington, Garmin Randolph, DeQuan Finn, and you could see those guys down there, Kelsey Johnson, but nowhere to be found. Sophomore shutdown quarter Caden Jenkins, Ole Miss transfer matchup nightmare tight end Michael Trigg, Steve Linton, Texas Tech transfer who led the nation in quarterback pressures last week, among a couple of others. Kendrick Simpkins, also not found there. And so Baylor, all of a sudden, you've got a bunch of guys out there you haven't seen before, and maybe that has to do with why they went down 21-0. But very odd to not see those guys even on the sideline. So Zach himself was the one who asked Dave Aranda after the game, and here was Coach Aranda's explanation as to where those guys might have been.
Coach, there were noticeably some players missing from the sideline. Caden Jenkins, Steve Linton, maybe a few others. Was they injured? Was that something else? Or, where were they?
There's a mix. There's a couple guys that are injured. There's a couple guys off the field, discipline issues. And so there's about 10 to 12 guys that were without. But, what I would say to that is it's next man up. We've got good players on this team. You have an opportunity to play. You've been wanting to play. Here's your opportunity to play. Let's go make a play. And so I think, that all of it comes down to execution. I think, I look at BYU, they're missing guys too, and they executed better than we did.
How disappointed are you to be having these discipline issues? Because, you're missing some major key players that played like great last week. And so it's kind of hard to know who's injured, who's disciplined, but what's going on that you're having those kind of issues?
I think there is always a maturity, growing up, and I think, when you bring people in and you bring transfers in, I think there's always an issue of, hey, what they're used to, what their program has been, what their maybe standards have been, ain't what ours is. And I think to make it work for them and for us, it has to come an acceptance of what we believe and what our standards are and how we go about doing things. And I think at times that's hard. I don't think it's necessarily a good or bad thing. I think it's a growing up thing, and it's a maturity thing. And I take a lot of pride in it, because I feel like that's part of the reason, it's a big part of the reason why I'm here. And it's one of the things that I want to really make an impact on. And I think this is part of the process. I'd like for it to be a little bit further along with a few individuals than it is now, but I believe in those individuals, and I want to see them succeed.
Is this like a short-term thing?
Short-term, yeah.
So you got both parts of it there. Credit to Matt Mosley as well for following up on that a few questions later to see if we can get more of an explanation as to what was going on. So many regulars missing. And then the report from Zach Smith of the Waco Trib on Sunday that linebacker Steve Linton and tight end Michael Trigg were suspended for Baylor's game against BYU, sources said on Saturday. So he has that according to a source. Obviously, you heard in that Dave Aranda did not specify which ones were suspended or not, but that would make sense as to why Michael Trigg and Steve Linton were not out there. And there remains questions about all the rest because look, I mean, there were injured guys too, but they were there with their jerseys on in sweats supporting their team. So when you start to see that many guys missing, it's either an outbreak of something of whatever, COVID or whooping cough or something, or there's suspensions going on and there's punishment for guys not being around the team. And that has to be super disappointing for guys who you brought in, not only for their talent, but for their leadership, guys who played a lot of football games like Michael Trigg and Steve Linton have. Both of them, this is their third program. Both of them have played, 4 years of college football. You're supposed to bring in those guys who have played a lot of college football games. In the case of Michael Trigg, at two pretty big time college football programs to, help this younger group learn what it takes to play at this level and to not even get through the first month of the season without having to suspend these guys for off the field stuff. That's massively disappointing. And obviously for Baylor fans, we know what it can come to when you don't discipline guys, and what that can do to a program. So it's not like, oh, darn, why is Dave Aranda disciplining these guys? It's like, where's the leadership on this team to make sure this doesn't happen? Why are these senior guys who are coming in and on their last chance to really make it in college football, and we don't even make it through month number 1 without stuff like this happening? By the way, I mentioned it. Michael Trigg, program number 3. Steve Linton, program number 3. I know it's the transfer portal era, but Trigg was a guy who entered the portal in December of last year, but left Ole Miss in September of last year. September 26th, it was confirmed by Lane Kiffin. Almost a year to the day, he left in the first month of the season. He reportedly had missed a practice, and Lane Kiffin didn't comment on anything else. He just said he's no longer part of our program in September. Here we are a year later in September, and he's not on the field for a crucial game for his team. And same thing with Steve Linton and a couple of other guys in there as well. That can't be promising for this program trying to turn things around. And by the way, it makes a Caleb Parker note in the post-game interviews that much more clarifying, because I thought Caleb Parker had maybe one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting quotes in the entire post-game press conference when he said this.
I mean, we need to show up to practice more. I don't think we have a lot of old guys on the team who have been through a lot of the wins and a lot of losses, but we also have a lot of young guys that I don't think have figured out how to practice like a winning team yet. And so that's our job as the elders on the team, to really show that and represent that and enforce that.
We need to show up to practice more. We need to show these young guys what a winning team looks like in practice. Well, I wonder about that because we're going on year 3 of losing record in 2022, 3-9 last year, losing record right now. There are like 1 or 2 holdovers from 2021, namely Matt Jones, the 6th-year linebacker. But there aren't many guys on this team that know what it's like to win, know what it's like to win at Baylor anyway. And if that's an issue now, why wasn't that addressed last year? And how has that still not been addressed if they knew that was a problem after a 3-9 year? And I want to believe these guys when they say that 3-9, that's not going to happen again. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. And then the next week it becomes, well, we need to make sure these guys know how to practice. I thought practice was going great last year. I heard that every Saturday, how great practice was going. And here on Saturday, number 5 of 2024, not even halfway through your season. We're hearing that practice is not going well in terms of looking like a winning team, and that some of your senior leaders, guys who have played a bunch of college football games at a high level, are already suspended. This is not a great moment right now for Baylor football. And it's a time where they need to respond. They have to answer. They have to start stringing some wins together, or this team / program is going to look completely different next year. And then there are reports of this and suspensions being handed out already in September. We love keeping a team in line. We hate that it has to come down to that right now. And we hate that Baylor still cannot start a game fast, especially at home, where it should be easier to. What is behind that? That's coming up next. But first, got to tell you about our proud sponsor over at FanDuel. You might know it as America's #1 sports book. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you're going to check the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets with FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Let me say that again. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The big issue that we can see as fans, more so than, some of the things we can't see, like the suspensions and who is there, who is not there, and why. The big issue that Baylor fans have been able to see over the last few years is the fact that they never seem like they're ready to start the game, especially at home. It's like waking up like you and I on a Saturday morning. Waking up, shaking off the cobwebs a little bit, long week at work, take your time getting out of bed. Enjoy as much time as you can, just resting and maybe taking on the day when you feel like you're ready to. With the college football team in the Big 12, that's not how it should be. And yet it seems like that every time these guys get to sleep in their own beds the night before a game, because at home, they never come out to strong starts. It's been this way for a couple years now. It's been this way since the 2021 Sugar Bowl year. That's not even a stretch. In fact, I saw a really good tweet from Michael Haig, who covers this team extensively now, doing it through the Waco Trib and some with the Dallas Morning News as well. Michael does a good job on this beat, and he put out some good research in this tweet. Baylor has consistently dug itself into early holes since the start of 2022, because since the start of the 22 season, they have been outscored by 108 points in the first half versus FBS teams. 108-point differential. Wow. And at home, they have been outscored 218-141 in the first half, all told, since the 2022 seasons, FBS and FCS. And at home, since the Kansas State game on November 12th, 2022, one that they lost 31-3, it was a massacre, they have been outscored 192-89 in the first half. Woof, man. That stinks. To go further into that, by the way, let me preface it like this. At home, against Power 4 opponents, they have not led at halftime since the Utah game in week 2 of last year. And that's the only time they have led at home at halftime against a Power 4 opponent since October of 2022. 23 months. And they've had one halftime lead against a Power 4 team at home. That's not asking a ton. If you are a Power 4 team, you can defend your home field and at least lead at halftime. They never do. They dig themselves a hole that, as we've seen in the last 2 years, they very rarely get themselves out of. Very rarely. And it happened again on Saturday. 21-0 like that in the first quarter. BYU scores touchdowns on their first 4 drives. Not just scores. They score touchdowns on their first 4 drives. And maybe more importantly, every time Baylor scored, BYU responded with points until under 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. If you're not going to give yourself a chance until the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter against a ranked team, you're not going to win many games. And that's where Baylor football's at right now. They don't win many games. And so I hear about how this team is different and that this is going to be not a 3-9 team, and that the players are different, and yet we don't see it ever. Dave Aranda, why can't your team start fast at home?
I don't think last year really has too much to do with this year. I understand the record of last year. I think this is a very different team, and I think this circumstance for this game is very different than last year's circumstance. I think we do have to play better. I think when we rep something and we walk through something and we fit something up and we do all of those things, we're expected to make those plays in the game. And when we don't, we got to get someone else that can. And we're about at that spot prior to changing the defense completely, And so we've got to way improve in that. And I take responsibility for that.
At least he wasn't saying it was a great week of practice. In fact, he kind of said it was. We walk through things and we do it well. But if you can't do it on Saturday, you can't do it. Because that's where we all make our money, so to speak, literally and figuratively. This is how we keep our jobs. This is how we keep playing football. It's how we keep coaching football. We're judged on Saturdays. And Baylor consistently is not ready to play on Saturdays. And there's blame to go all the way around for that. And so, again, you heard it there. We hear that it's different from 2023. I like to believe that it's different from 2023 from some of the plays that I've seen out there, but it's the same thing that got you in 2023. 2 FBS opponents you have faced at home, and you have been a -14 this year. You were down 17 to BYU, and you needed a last-second field goal in the first half to go up 6-3 against Air Force in the first half. Air Force. If they were a halfway decent FBS team, which they're not right now, you probably would have been losing that game at halftime too. And we're talking about a complete disaster. If we weren't already talking about a complete disaster. There isn't a team in the country that deals with this kind of stuff as a Power 4 team that can't even defend their home turf for a half. That used to be the problem with Dave Aranda's teams. They didn't win on the road. They were good at home. The problem used to be the road thing. Oh, they'll win their home games, but if you want to be a truly good team, you got to win a couple games on the road. I would take that issue right now. But once again, Baylor cannot win at McLean Stadium. And you heard it last year. You remember that Aranda quote of like, we gotta get our guys in like a road game mindset to play at home. For a guy who like really focuses and hones in on the mindset, there seems to be something wrong with the mindset every month, every week. Every time he takes the podium, there's something different with the mindset. Last year was they didn't have the mindset to play at home. This year, it was the mindset of the Utah game that they put too much pressure on themselves. Now it's the mindset of we've got to defend our home turf and we got to start fast, and it's still not happening. None of it's happening. So it's just we are way past the talk is cheap part of this. We went through the whole last year in the talk is cheap phase, and it continues into 2024. So, of course, Baylor fans, we're sick of it. We're sick of it. Seeing this team just get hit in the mouth every time they take the field at home. That a team comes in from wherever around the country and can just impose their will through at least the first quarter. Baylor struggles to play 4 quarters anywhere, but to barely play like 2.5 quarters of real football at home, week after week, month after month, and now season after season. Something has to change. Something. And it's everyone's fault. You know, there are plenty of things that I say, oh, that's on the coaches, can't blame the players, and some things where I say that's a player mistake. This is all the way around. This is the buzzword, a culture thing. Yes, that's part of your culture if you can't win at home and can never start well at home, ever. That is a deep lying issue with everyone involved with the program. And part of that, just a little part of that, is the fans. And it was a tough scene for Baylor fans at McLean Stadium on Saturday. And now people are taking notice, notably people who are the parents to very important 2025 recruits in this Baylor football resurrection of recruiting, and how that might affect these kids trying to come in the class of 2025. That's coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, my number one ticketing destination. In fact, I'm looking this week. They go on sale November 9th. Baylor football's bye week. Baylor taking on Arkansas at the AAC. Scott Drew versus John Calipari. Gametime is the only place I'm looking because it is the most real. Okay, they've got all-in pricing. I just use that feature, and what it does is I can see the price I'm going to pay from the view from my seat that I'm going to pay for. You get a panoramic view from your seat. No, sit behind a pole without you knowing. No hidden fees in there. Plus, you get the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. You guys are going to make a difference at McLean Stadium going forward this year. You do it through Gametime. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON, COLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So one thing that I was kind of noticing in the early parts of the game as Baylor was falling down 21-0 was the crowd. And I know that's been a big point of discussion for the last couple of years here. Some of you are way into it. Some of you, it makes you want to vomit just hearing another discussion about Baylor crowds. I know the former host of this podcast was big into talking about the crowds, commentary on Baylor crowds. And yeah, Drake wore me down a little bit with that. I get it. I think he's still interested in it. But of course, he had a point a lot of these times. We were just all kind of sick of hearing it, right? And I thought the students showed out big time in the first two games. Ones that are tough sells off a 3-9 season. You're facing Tarleton and Air Force, and it's really, really hot. And when you get into the stadium, it's the hottest part of the day for, a 6 o'clock, 6:30 kickoff. But they had good student sections the first two games of the season, Baylor line and otherwise. And so then you're coming off a really tough loss to Colorado. We were all in that boat, but you've got a home game against a ranked team who's going to bring a good amount of their own fans too. This is your chance to turn around the fortunes of your season. Get a good atmosphere in McLean Stadium, show this team that you're behind them, and maybe, just maybe, we have an effect on the game and we turn some things around. Well, as BYU went up 21-0, it sounded like a Cougars home game. It was a pitiful crowd there on Saturday. And I can hear you guys typing in the comments and tweeting at Locked On Baylor. You're saying, well, there's one easy way that we can all fix this for having more people in the stands. Win some football games. Put out a product that is worth us using our Saturday to go to McLean Stadium and support. I hear you guys. I hear you. I really do. I'm not just hearing, I'm listening. I understand. Like it's tough to watch that product. Watch us go down 21-0. And yeah, it was also just as exciting to see that comeback, which very nearly ended up in a pretty improbable Baylor victory. I think the people that were there and stuck around were, happy at most of the game that they saw. That doesn't excuse the 21-0, as I'm not excusing it. A loss is a loss. At the end of the day, we're asking Dave Aranda press conference questions about why they didn't win, not how great an almost comeback it was. but biggest freshman class in Baylor history. That line out there was pathetic. Pathetic, man. What else are you guys doing at 11 a.m. on a Saturday? Baylor freshmen. As someone who used to work in the admissions office and know how much these people put into recruiting the right students to come here, and seeing how excited they get when we talk about things like the Baylor line and how much athletics means to this campus, that sucked seeing what was out there and all those empty seats in the Baylor line section. Like that, there's no other way to cut that. It looks terrible for us. And that doesn't excuse the rest of the students too, because there was plenty of empty pockets in there. Obviously, the easiest answer is this team needs to win. But I have thought about the comparison between this team and 2018. In 2018, it was not the most skilled team Baylor's ever had. It was just figuring out what Matt Rule ball looks like when it's winning. There were a couple of games where they were really outmatched. They were coming off of 1-11. They were still trying to build their coach's culture. And they knew that they could bounce back pretty quickly. And that if they didn't, in the wake of the scandal a few years ago, 1-11 the year before, that it would mean bad news for the Baylor program. That 2018 team lays the foundation for a Sugar Bowl appearance in 2019 and eventually lays a foundation for the 2021 team that we remember so fondly. That team, my senior year, got pretty awesome support throughout the season at McLean Stadium. Homecoming against Oklahoma State, game they should not have won. Oklahoma State was a better team. Baylor was down 10 in the fourth quarter. They rallied to score the last 14 points of the game, and McLean Stadium was going ballistic. Ballistic. Friend of the program, Connor Martin, kicking the game-winning field goal against Kansas State also in that year. McLean Stadium up for grabs. He could tell you. There was great support for that team that year, even knowing that they weren't a very great team. They were fine. They were a good team. And they were a bad team the year before. Instead, here we go. First chance of asking for a real football game at McLean. Ranked opponent in the conference. Team really needs it. And the place is half empty. And half of the people that were there were chanting BYU the whole game. BYU's a tough team to beat at home, and they essentially had a home game in Waco on Saturday. 1,200 miles from their school, and you let it be a home game. That's not a good look all the way around, and people are starting to take notice. Not just the Drake Toll pictures of the crowd. Taz Williams Sr., the dad of one of the biggest recruits that Baylor has in this 2025 recruiting class, composite 4-star Taz Williams Jr. from Red Oak. He said, man, he pointed it out on Twitter that this is not a good look for the 2025 class. In fact, he said the lack of fan support at home games will ruin the incoming 25 recruiting class. You have to do everything as a program right now to make sure your momentum in recruiting does not falter. We obviously, this season needs a lot of work, but if this season doesn't work and you're losing that 25 recruiting class, this football program might get set back a decade. So when you look out at the stadium for a team that's about to fall down to 2-3, and you see that there's not a ton of fan support there, you might not be thinking about how it's going to set the program back a long time. But if things like this continue, both what's on the field and what's in the stands, that is what's going to happen. That is what's going to happen. And so there's plenty of finger pointing to go around. Plenty of it. But that doesn't exclude us, the Baylor fans, either. And we heard Dave Aranda talk about it earlier this year, both that we've got to be cool in order for people to get there, but also after the last home game, really showing the importance of that. He literally said it. He's like, I think that's a big deal for recruits to see a great home game atmosphere. And to hear this from the dad of, one of the true prized recruits from this class, one who picked Baylor over a couple of big-time schools, including Michigan, shocked the country by picking Baylor. to hear someone that close to him saying, yeah, this kind of support we saw today is going to ruin the class. That's a wake-up call. That's a red flag for Baylor fans everywhere. And it's got to have everyone looking in the mirror. We've got to create a better atmosphere, and the team's got to play better. No doubt. So it's not a fun time in Baylor Nation right now. Not a fun time whatsoever. And it feels like we kind of all need to wake up a little bit more. You know, whether it's the team, the coaches, the fans, the athletic director, whoever needs waking up. It's got to start happening real soon, because now Baylor's about to go on the road to a very good Iowa State team that has entered the rankings, and you're almost in must-win territory. And it would be a real shame if this program does get set back a decade because they stuck with the wrong coach, or because they didn't have enough fans in the stands and they lost a recruiting class, or all of the above, which is what could be on the table right now. Let me know what you think about the state of this program and the suspensions and the slow starts and the home atmosphere, all of it. Please drop that down in the comments below. Make your voice heard on what needs to be changed in this program and this team this season. Drop that down in the comments section below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Free and easy every day. We're the only place that's bringing you strictly Baylor sports 5 days a week. That's not a part of the university. And we're so proud of that. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you tomorrow on your favorite show, Locked on Baylor.